She thought it was a fake wedding, until the CEO whispered, "You're mine now." That's when everything in her world shattered. A hard-working woman steps in for her troubled twin, thinking she's just helping with a simple photo shoot. But the moment those papers are signed, she realizes nothing about this wedding is fake. Because the powerful CEO, he knows exactly who she is. And he's been waiting for her. And worse, dangerous people are hunting her family, and this fake wedding might be the only thing keeping her alive. But why did he really choose her? What terrifying secret is he hiding behind that whisper? And when the truth finally explodes, will this shocking marriage save her life? Or destroy it? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Zoe's feet ached as she made her way up the worn stairs to her third-floor apartment. The evening sun cast long shadows through the stairwell windows, marking another day of caring for others coming to an end. Her blue scrubs still carried the antiseptic smell of the nursing home where she'd spent the last 12 hours tending to her elderly patients. "Just need to get dinner started," she mumbled to herself, fishing her keys from her bag. The familiar jingle of metal against metal was interrupted by Mrs. Rodriguez's cat meowing from the apartment next door. Zoe managed a tired smile. "Hey there, Pepper." As she unlocked her door, the sweet smell of something baking wafted into the hallway. Her Aunt Laverne must have decided to do some cooking. The thought of walking into a warm kitchen lifted her spirits. "I'm home," Zoe called out, stepping inside their modest two-bedroom apartment. The walls were decorated with family photos and Mia's colorful artwork, making the small space feel like a real home. "Auntie Zoe!" 5-year-old Mia came running from the kitchen, her braids bouncing with each step. She wrapped her arms around Zoe's legs, nearly knocking her over. "Aunt Laverne let me help make cookies." "Is that what smells so good?" Zoe bent down to hug her niece properly, breathing in the familiar scent of baby shampoo and sugar cookies. "Did you save any for me?" "They're not done yet," Mia said seriously, grabbing Zoe's hand to pull her towards the kitchen. "But Aunt Laverne says I can have 2 after dinner if I eat all my vegetables." In the kitchen, Aunt Laverne stood at the stove, stirring a pot of what looked like her famous vegetable soup. Her grey hair was pulled back in its usual neat bun, and she wore the floral apron Zoe had given her last Christmas. "Welcome home, child," Laverne said, turning to give Zoe a warm smile. "You look dead on your feet. Sit down and rest while I finish up here." "I can help," Zoe started to offer, but Laverne waved her off with the wooden spoon. "You've been helping others all day. Let someone help you for a change." Zoe sank into a kitchen chair, grateful for the moment of peace. Mia climbed into her lap, chattering about her day at kindergarten. Something about finger painting and a new friend named Sophie who had light-up sneakers. The peaceful moment shattered as the front door burst open with a bang. Zoe instinctively tightened her hold on Mia, while Laverne muttered something under her breath that sounded like, "Lord, give me strength." "Zoe, thank God you're home." Naomi Bennett rushed into the kitchen, her designer purse swinging wildly from her arm. Despite being identical twins, Naomi's perfectly styled hair and trendy outfit stood in stark contrast to Zoe's practical work clothes and simple ponytail. "Mommy!" Mia called out, but stayed firmly in Zoe's lap. "Hi, baby," Naomi said distractedly, her attention focused entirely on her twin. "Zoe, I need your help, like serious emergency help." Aunt Laverne turned down the heat under the soup pot, her expression wary. "What kind of emergency are we talking about this time, Naomi?" "It's about work," Naomi said, pacing the small kitchen. "I was supposed to do this big photo shoot tomorrow morning. It's this whole wedding theme thing for some corporate client. but I totally messed up and double-booked myself with another job that I absolutely cannot cancel." "And how exactly is that Zoe's emergency?" Laverne asked, folding her arms across her chest. "Because she can help me." Naomi turned pleading eyes to her sister. "We're identical twins. You could take my place at the wedding shoot. Nobody would know the difference." "Naomi, no," Zoe said firmly, shifting Mia off her lap. "I can't pretend to be you at work. That's completely dishonest. Please, you have to." Naomi's voice cracked with desperation. "If I mess this up, the agency will drop me. I'll lose all my bookings. How am I supposed to pay my share of Mia's expenses if I lose my income?" The mention of Mia's care made Zoe's chest tighten. While she had primary custody of her niece, Naomi did contribute financially when she could. The arrangement wasn't ideal, but it was what worked best for everyone, especially Mia. "There has to be another solution," Zoe said, but she could feel her resolve weakening. Naomi dropped into the chair beside her, grabbing her hands. "It's just one morning. The shoot starts at 9 o'clock at the Riverside Hotel. All you have to do is wear a wedding dress, smile for the camera, and follow the photographer's directions. I'll even give you my modeling tips." "You know good and well this isn't right," Aunt Laverne interjected. "Asking your sister to lie for you?" "It's not lying," Naomi protested. "It's just helping family. Right, Mia? Don't you think Auntie Zoe should help Mommy?" Mia looked between the adults uncertainly, sensing the tension in the room. "I don't want Mommy to lose her job," she said in a small voice. Zoe closed her eyes, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. This was wrong. She knew it was wrong. But the thought of Naomi losing her income, of Mia suffering because of it. "Just this once," she said finally, opening her eyes to meet her twin's gaze. "And you have to promise me nothing will go wrong." "Nothing will go wrong." Naomi jumped up and hugged her tightly. "You're the best sister ever. I'll text you all the details tonight. Thank you, thank you, thank you." "Dinner's ready," Aunt Laverne announced, her tone making it clear she disapproved of the whole situation. "Naomi, are you staying?" "Can't, got to run." Naomi was already heading for the door. She blew a kiss to Mia. "Be good for Auntie Zoe and Aunt Laverne, baby. Mommy loves you." After Naomi left, the apartment felt eerily quiet. Mia helped Aunt Laverne set the table while Zoe changed out of her scrubs. Throughout dinner, she could feel her aunt's concerned glances, but neither of them spoke about what had just happened. Later that night, after Mia was tucked into bed with her favorite stuffed elephant, Zoe stood at the kitchen sink washing dishes. The familiar routine usually calmed her, but tonight her thoughts were racing with worry about tomorrow. "Lord," she whispered, watching soap bubbles swirl down the drain. "Please give me strength for whatever comes next. And please don't let this be another one of Naomi's mistakes that I end up paying for." The only response was the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic outside their window. Zoe finished the last dish, dried her hands, and checked her phone. Naomi had sent several texts with details about the photo shoot. Where to go, what time to arrive, who to ask for. It was just one morning, she told herself. One morning of pretending to be her sister, wearing a wedding dress and smiling for cameras. How hard could it be? But as she got ready for bed, a nagging feeling in her gut told her it wouldn't be that simple. Nothing involving Naomi ever was. The early morning sun had barely crept over the horizon when Zoe's alarm buzzed at 5:30. She blinked away exhaustion, her usual morning fatigue doubled by a restless night of worry. The familiar sounds of her small apartment, the gurgle of the ancient coffee maker, the hum of the refrigerator, helped ground her as she went through her morning routine. "Mia, sweetie," she called softly, gently shaking her niece's shoulder. "Time to get ready for school." The little girl stirred, clutching her stuffed elephant tighter. 5 more minutes, Auntie Zoe. Not today, precious. Zoe smoothed Mia's tangled curls. We need to leave extra early this morning, remember? Auntie has that special appointment. Getting Mia dressed and fed took longer than usual, perhaps because Zoe's own nerves made her fumble simple tasks like braiding hair and spreading peanut butter on toast. By 7:15, they were finally heading out the door, Mia's backpack stuffed with her lunch and favorite, drawing supplies. The preschool was only 6 blocks away, but Zoe held Mia's hand extra tight as they walked. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of spring flowers from the small gardens that lined their neighborhood streets. Will you pick me up today? Mia asked as they approached the cheerful yellow building with its playground out front. Of course, sweetheart, just like always. Zoe knelt down to give her a proper hug. Have a wonderful day. I love you. Love you too. Mia skipped toward her waiting teacher, turning back once to wave. Watching her go, Zoe felt a familiar ache in her chest. Everything she did, including this questionable favor for her sister, was ultimately for that precious little girl. The bus ride downtown took 45 minutes, giving Zoe plenty of time to second-guess her decision. The Drake Corporation's flagship hotel rose before her like a gleaming silver mountain, 60 stories of steel and glass that made her feel impossibly small. Her sensible flats clicked softly on the polished marble floor as she entered the soaring lobby, her heart pounding. Ms. Bennett? A slim woman in a tailored suit approached, tablet in hand. I'm Patricia, the event coordinator. We've been waiting for you. Before Zoe could respond, she was whisked into an elevator and up to a luxurious suite that seemed bigger than her entire apartment. 3 stylists descended on her immediately, clucking and fussing as they steered her toward a makeup chair. Your portfolio shots look so different, one commented, tilting Zoe's face toward the light. The lighting must have been incredible. Oh, yes, lighting can change everything, Zoe managed, trying to sound confident like Naomi would. For the next hour, they transformed her with expert hands, smoothing cream on her skin, curling her hair into elegant waves, applying makeup that somehow looked both natural and glamorous. Zoe barely recognized herself in the mirror. Time for the gown, Patricia announced, returning with 2 assistants who carried a garment bag like it contained solid gold. Zoe's breath caught as they revealed the dress, ivory silk that seemed to float like clouds, hand-beaded with tiny crystals that caught the light. It was the kind of gown she'd dreamed about as a little girl, before life had taught her to be more practical. It's beautiful, she whispered. Wait until you're in it. One of the stylists winked. They helped her step into the dress, making small adjustments until it fit like it had been made for her. The weight of it felt significant, almost ceremonial. Zoe tried to remind herself this was just pretend, just a photo shoot, but something about the whole production felt oddly serious. Perfect timing, Patricia said, checking her tablet. They're ready for you downstairs. The ceremony hall took Zoe's breath away. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, making the crystal chandeliers sparkle. White roses and lilies covered every surface, their sweet scent filling the air. Professional cameras were set up discreetly around the room, but something about their placement seemed strange for a typical photo shoot. And then she saw him. Ryland Drake stood at the front of the room, tall and distinguished in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo. His dark hair was styled just so, highlighting strong features that seemed both stern and gentle. He turned as she entered, and something in his expression made her pause. The way he looked at her wasn't the polite interest of a businessman doing a corporate photo shoot. There was an emotion in his steel-grey eyes that she couldn't quite name, something intense and searching that made her skin tingle. Their gazes locked as she walked toward him, guided by Patricia's gentle direction. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the slight tension in his jaw. He studied her face like he was trying to memorize it, or perhaps trying to solve a puzzle. "You look beautiful," he said softly, and the sincerity in his voice made her cheeks warm. "Thank you," she murmured, hoping her nervousness wasn't obvious. "This is also elaborate for a photo shoot." Something flickered in his expression. Surprise? Concern? But before he could respond, Patricia was positioning them side by side at the front of the room. "Perfect," the coordinator said, stepping back. "Everything's ready." Zoe took a deep breath, reminding herself one last time that this was all pretend. Just a favor for her sister. Just a corporate photo shoot. But when the officiant stepped forward in formal robes, opening a leather folder with careful reverence, her heart stopped. This wasn't a folder of photography instructions or posing guidelines. This was something else entirely. The officiant cleared his throat and began speaking in a resonant voice that filled the ceremony hall. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Rylan James Drake and Zoe Elizabeth Bennet in holy matrimony." Zoe's heart stuttered. These weren't photography directions. These were real wedding vows. Her fingers trembled in Rylan's firm grip as panic bloomed in her chest. "Wait," she whispered urgently, trying to catch Rylan's eye. "There must be some mistake. This isn't supposed to be real." Rylan's thumb stroked soothingly across her knuckles as he held her hand steady. His steel-grey eyes met hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You're mine now," he murmured, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "And I always keep my promises." Confusion and fear coursed through her veins like ice water. What promises? What was happening? The room seemed to spin slightly as the officiant continued speaking, his words blurring together in her ears. Camera flashes sparked around them like lightning, documenting every moment. Zoe felt frozen, unable to pull away or speak up as the ceremony proceeded. When the leather folder was placed before them, Rylan's strong hand guided hers to sign on the dotted line. Her signature looked wobbly and uncertain next to his bold strokes. "By the power vested in me," the officiant declared, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." The words fell like heavy stones in Zoe's stomach. This couldn't be happening. This had to be some elaborate prank or misunderstanding. But the weight of the ring now adorning her left hand felt all too real. Before she could gather her scattered thoughts, Rylan's hand settled at the small of her back, guiding her firmly but gently toward a side door. The moment they were alone in the quiet room, Zoe wrenched away from him, her heart pounding. "What is going on?" she demanded, hating how her voice shook. "That wasn't supposed to be real. It can't be legal." Rylan stood between her and the door, his expression carefully controlled. "The marriage is completely legal and binding," he said quietly. "You are now my wife in every sense of the word." "But I didn't agree to this." Zoe pressed her hands against her temples, trying to think clearly through the panic. "I was only supposed to stand in for a photo shoot. This is crazy." "We need to discuss this privately," Rylan said, his tone brooking no argument. "My office would be more appropriate for this conversation." A knock at the door interrupted them. Daniel Pierce, Rylan's security chief, stepped inside. His watchful eyes swept the room before settling on Rylan. "The car is ready, sir." "Thank you, Daniel." Rylan turned back to Zoe, extending his hand. "Shall we?" Zoe stared at his offered hand like it might bite her. Every instinct screamed at her to run. But where could she go? She was wearing a wedding dress in a strange building, and she had just legally married one of the most powerful men in the city. The thought made her dizzy. "I don't have a choice, do I?" she whispered. Something flickered in Rylan's eyes. Regret, determination. but his voice remained steady. "There's always a choice, Zoe. But right now, the best choice is to come with me so we can talk privately." Daniel held the door open as Rylan guided her through the hotel's back corridors, avoiding the crowds of guests and photographers. The sleek black car waiting at the private entrance gleamed in the afternoon sun like polished obsidian. As Zoe slid into the plush leather seat, still wearing her wedding gown, she felt less like a bride and more like someone who had been kidnapped by circumstance. Rylan settled beside her, close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne, and the car pulled smoothly away from the curb. The city streets blurred past the tinted windows as Zoe sat in stunned silence, her mind racing. How had a simple favor for her sister turned into this? What kind of promises had Naomi made in her name? And most importantly, what did Rylan Drake want with her? The car glided to a stop in front of the Drake Corporation's main office tower. As Daniel opened the door, Zoe gathered the voluminous skirts of her wedding dress, feeling completely out of place. She followed Rylan into the building, aware of the curious stares from employees as they made their way to the private elevator. Her new husband, the thought made her stomach lurch, stood beside her as they ascended to the top floor, his presence both commanding and unsettling. Zoe clutched her hands together, the unfamiliar wedding ring pressing against her fingers, a constant reminder of how drastically her life had changed in the span of a single morning. The elevator doors opened onto the top floor of Drake Corporation's headquarters. Zoe's wedding heels clicked against the polished marble as she followed Rylan down a corridor lined with floor-to-ceiling windows. The afternoon sun streamed in, making her squint and casting long shadows across their path. Rylan's office occupied the corner of the building, a vast space enclosed by walls of glass that offered breathtaking views of the city skyline. He held the door open for her, and Zoe stepped inside, her wedding dress rustling softly against the carpet. "Please sit." Rylan gestured to a plush leather chair positioned in front of his imposing desk. As Zoe lowered herself carefully, trying to arrange the yards of white fabric, he remained standing, his tall frame silhouetted against the cityscape behind him. "I owe you an explanation," he began, his deep voice gentle but serious. "And I need you to listen carefully to everything I'm about to tell you." Zoe's fingers twisted nervously in her lap. "I think I deserve that much, at least." Rylan's expression softened as he looked at her. "Do you remember the night of October 15th, 5 years ago?" She frowned, trying to recall. "I'm not sure what—" "It was raining," he continued. "You were walking home from a late shift at the nursing home. You found a man bleeding in an alley off 23rd Street. Zoe's eyes widened as the memory suddenly crystallized. "The mugging victim," she whispered. That was you!" He nodded slowly. "I had been attacked by 3 men. They took my wallet, my phone, left me for dead. You found me, called 911, and stayed with me until the ambulance arrived." "You were losing so much blood," Zoe remembered, her voice distant. "I used my sweater to apply pressure to the wound. I kept talking to you, trying to keep you conscious." "You saved my life that night," Rylan said quietly. "The paramedics said if you hadn't found me when you did, if you hadn't known exactly what to do—" He trailed off, his hands gripping the back of his chair. "By the time I was well enough to try to find you, to thank you, you had moved. The hospital had no record of your full name." Zoe's mind was reeling. "But how did you finally find me?" A shadow crossed Rylan's face. "Through your sister, Naomi, though not in the way I would have wished." He moved around his desk and sat down, leaning forward with his hands clasped. "Naomi has become involved with some very dangerous people, Zoe, a criminal syndicate that specializes in identity theft and fraud." The blood drained from Zoe's face. "What? No, that can't be. I have proof, Ryland said gently. My security team has been tracking their operations for months. They've been targeting medical professionals, stealing their credentials, their identities, and recently they set their sights on you. Me? Zoe's voice came out as barely more than a whisper. Your nursing credentials, your clean record, your access to medical facilities, it's valuable to them. And Naomi... He hesitated. She's been pressured to help them get to you. Zoe felt sick. All those times Naomi had asked to borrow her ID, claimed she'd lost important mail, needed to use Zoe's address for work things. The pieces were falling into place with horrible clarity. The marriage this morning, Ryland continued, his voice growing softer, was not just about finally finding you again. As my wife, you have the full protection of Drake Corporation's security. Your identity is now legally tied to mine, making it virtually impossible for them to exploit your credentials without drawing immediate attention. You married me to protect me? Zoe's head was spinning. But why not just warn me? Why go to such extremes? Because these people are extremely dangerous, and they don't give up easily. Ryland's jaw tightened. A simple warning wouldn't be enough. They needed to know you were completely off-limits, untouchable. And he met her eyes directly. Because I've spent 5 years looking for the woman who saved my life with such compassion and courage. When I finally found you, I wasn't about to let you slip away again. Zoe sat in stunned silence, trying to process everything. Her sister's betrayal, the danger she'd been in without knowing it. This man who had searched for her for so long, it was overwhelming. Part of her wanted to reject it all as impossible, but deep down, she knew he was telling the truth. What happens now? She asked finally, her voice small. I need you to stay at my estate, at least temporarily, Ryland said. It's the safest place for you right now. We have state-of-the-art security, and my team can protect you while we deal with the syndicate. But my aunt, my niece, Zoe protested. They'll be protected too, Ryland assured her quickly. I've already arranged for additional security at their home. But you're the primary target, Zoe. I need to know you're safe. The sincerity in his voice made her heart flutter strangely. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not just the powerful CEO, but the man whose life she had saved that rainy night. The gratitude and determination in his eyes were unmistakable. Will you trust me? He asked softly. Will you let me protect you, the way you protected me? The sleek black car glided through the early evening traffic, carrying Zoe away from the familiar streets of her neighborhood toward the outskirts of the city. She sat quietly in the back seat beside Ryland, watching the buildings grow farther apart, replaced by sprawling estates hidden behind ornate gates and carefully manicured hedges. Her hands twisted nervously in her lap, the weight of her new wedding ring still foreign and unsettling. The events of the day felt like a dream, or maybe a nightmare. She couldn't quite decide which. We're almost there, Ryland said softly, breaking the silence. He had been stealing glances at her throughout the ride, his expression a mixture of concern and something else she couldn't quite read. The car turned onto a long, winding driveway bordered by towering oak trees. As they crested a small hill, Zoe caught her first glimpse of the Drake estate. The mansion was impressive, but not ostentatious, with warm stone walls and large windows that glowed invitingly in the deepening twilight. As the car came to a stop at the front entrance, an elderly woman emerged from the house. She had silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, kind eyes, and an air of quiet dignity about her. Miss Geneva, Ryland said as he helped Zoe from the car. I'd like you to meet Zoe. He paused for just a moment before adding, my wife. "Welcome, dear one," Miss Geneva said warmly, stepping forward to take Zoe's hands in hers. Her grip was gentle but reassuring, and something in her eyes told Zoe that this woman saw right through her carefully maintained composure. "Thank you," Zoe managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "You must be exhausted," Miss Geneva said, already guiding her towards the door. "Let's get you settled and then have some dinner. Everything feels more manageable with a proper meal." The interior of the house was as elegant as the exterior, with rich hardwood floors and tasteful artwork, but Miss Geneva's presence made it feel more like a home than a showcase. She led them to a cozy dining room where the table was already set for 3. "I hope you don't mind," Miss Geneva said as they sat down, "but I took the liberty of preparing something simple. Sometimes comfort food is what we need most." The meal was indeed simple but delicious. Herb-roasted chicken, fresh vegetables, and warm bread that filled the room with its homey scent. Zoe found herself eating more than she expected, realizing she hadn't had anything since breakfast. Throughout dinner, Miss Geneva kept the conversation light, sharing stories about the garden she tended and the family of cardinals that had made a nest near the kitchen window. Her gentle chatter filled what could have been awkward silences, and Zoe felt some of her tension beginning to ease. Ryland spoke little, but watched Zoe with careful attention, as if trying to gauge her state of mind. When she stifled a yawn, he exchanged a look with Miss Geneva. "I think it's time we showed you to your room," Miss Geneva said, rising from her chair. "You've had quite a day." Zoe followed Miss Geneva up a grand staircase and down a hallway lined with soft carpet. The older woman opened a door to reveal a spacious guest suite decorated in soothing shades of blue and cream. "Your things will be brought up shortly," Miss Geneva said, watching as Zoe took in the room. The wedding gown had already been carefully draped over a chair, a stark reminder of the morning's events. Seeing Zoe's expression fall, Miss Geneva stepped closer and placed a gentle hand on her arm. "You know, dear," she said softly, "sometimes the greatest blessings come wrapped in the most frightening packages. I've learned over the years that God works in ways we don't always understand at first." Zoe turned to look at the older woman, struck by the wisdom and compassion in her face. "How do you know when to trust and when to run?" she asked quietly. "The heart knows," Miss Geneva replied. "And from what I've seen of you already, you have a good one. Trust it." She patted Zoe's hand. "Now try to get some rest. Tomorrow is a new day." After Miss Geneva left, Zoe explored the suite, finding a bathroom stocked with everything she might need, and a closet that already contained several sets of new clothes in her size. The thoughtfulness behind these preparations both touched and unsettled her. She had just changed into a soft nightgown when her phone buzzed. Her heart jumped when she saw Naomi's name on the screen. The message was brief but chilling. "Don't trust him. They're watching." Zoe's hands shook as she stared at the words. The peace she had begun to feel crumbled away, replaced by a rising tide of anxiety. What had her sister gotten them into? Who were they? And Rylan, was he truly her protector, or was there something more sinister behind his actions? She curled up under the plush covers of the king-sized bed, but sleep felt impossible. Outside, she could hear the wind picking up, rustling through the trees. A storm was coming, both literally and figuratively, and she had no idea how to weather it. The elegant room suddenly felt too large, too exposed. Every shadow seemed to hide potential threats. Zoe pulled the covers tighter around herself, her mind racing with questions she couldn't answer. The wedding ring on her finger caught the dim light from the window, a glinting reminder of how completely her life had changed in a single day. Through the growing sounds of the storm, she could hear occasional footsteps in the hallway. Security guards making their rounds, she assumed. But instead of making her feel safer, each passing step only heightened her awareness of her strange new reality. She was now Mrs. Drake, wife to a man she barely knew, hiding from dangers she didn't fully understand, in a house that felt more like a beautiful prison than a sanctuary. Sleep continued to elude her as the storm gathered strength outside her windows, matching the turbulent emotions swirling in her heart. The first rays of dawn filtered through the gauzy curtains, rousing Zoe from her fitful sleep. She blinked, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings, until memory flooded back. The wedding, Ryland's revelation, and Naomi's cryptic warning. A gentle knock at the door made her sit up. "Come in," she called, pulling the covers closer. Miss Geneva entered, carrying a breakfast tray that filled the room with the aroma of fresh coffee and warm pastries. "Good morning, dear. I thought you might prefer breakfast in your room today." "Thank you," Zoe said softly, touched by the thoughtfulness. The tray held a perfect arrangement of fresh fruit, yogurt, and what looked like homemade muffins. "Now then," Miss Geneva said, setting the tray on a small table by the window. "Let's find you something comfortable to wear." She moved to the closet and opened it wide, revealing rows of carefully selected clothing. Zoe slipped out of bed and joined her, running her fingers along the soft fabrics. "This is too much," she whispered. "Nonsense," Miss Geneva replied warmly. "Rylan wanted to ensure you had everything you might need. He can be rather thorough in his planning." She selected a simple navy blue sweater and dark jeans. "These should suit you nicely." As Zoe dressed, Miss Geneva shared bits of information about the house and its routines. Her steady stream of conversation helped normalize what still felt like an extraordinary situation. "Rylan asked if you would join him in the kitchen when you're ready," Miss Geneva mentioned as she gathered the breakfast dishes. "He'd like to show you around the estate." Zoe nodded, grateful for Miss Geneva's calming presence. After the older woman left, she took extra care with her appearance, trying to project a confidence she didn't quite feel. The woman in the mirror looked both familiar and strange, still herself, but somehow different in these new surroundings. The kitchen proved easier to find than she expected, following the hallway down to where warm morning light spilled through large windows. Ryland stood at the counter, reading something on his tablet while sipping coffee. He looked up as she entered, and something in his expression softened. "Good morning," he said, setting aside his tablet. "Did you sleep well? As well as could be expected?" she answered honestly. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Would you like to see the grounds? It's a beautiful morning for a walk." The estate revealed itself gradually as they toured the property. The gardens came first, meticulously maintained but not overly formal. Spring flowers nodded in the morning breeze, and stone paths wound between carefully tended beds. "Miss Geneva oversees the gardens," Rylan explained as they walked. "She has quite the green thumb. These roses are her pride and joy." Zoe paused to admire a particularly vibrant bloom. "They're beautiful." Their next stop was the security office, housed in a modern addition to the main building. Daniel Pierce, Ryland's security chief, greeted them with professional courtesy. "We maintain 24-hour surveillance of the property," Ryland explained, showing her the bank of monitors. "Every entrance is secured, and the grounds are regularly patrolled." Zoe studied the screens, noting how the cameras covered every approach to the house. The setup should have made her feel safer, but instead it emphasized the reality of whatever threat had prompted all these precautions. "You're not a prisoner here," Ryland said quietly, reading her expression. "You can leave whenever you wish. I just want you to be safe." The library provided a welcome contrast to the high-tech security center. 3 walls of floor-to-ceiling bookshelves surrounded comfortable leather chairs and a massive oak desk. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, creating pools of warmth on the hardwood floor. "This is my favorite room," Rylan admitted, running his hand along a shelf of well-worn classics. "It's where I come to think." Zoe gravitated toward a collection of medical texts. "These are amazing," she said, carefully opening one. "I noticed your interest in healthcare from your work history," Rylan said. "Feel free to borrow anything that interests you." As the day progressed, Zoe found herself relaxing slightly in Rylan's presence. He was patient with her questions, never pushing when she grew quiet, and seemed genuinely interested in her responses when she did speak. Early evening found them walking near the fountain at the center of the garden. The setting sun painted the sky in soft pinks and golds, and the sound of falling water created a peaceful backdrop. "Thank you," Zoe said suddenly, stopping to watch the play of light on the water. "For showing me everything today. For explaining things." Rylan stood beside her, close but not touching. "I know this situation isn't ideal," he said softly, "but I want you to feel comfortable here, to know you're safe." Looking at him in the gentle evening light, Zoe saw something she hadn't noticed before. A vulnerability beneath his controlled exterior, a genuine concern in the way he watched her. It didn't erase her fears or answer all her questions, but it made him seem more human, less the powerful CEO who had orchestrated such an elaborate protection scheme. The fountain's spray caught the last rays of sunlight, creating tiny rainbows in the mist. A peaceful moment stretched between them, full of unspoken possibilities. Sunlight streamed through the guest suite windows, waking Zoe gradually. For a moment she lay still, orienting herself in the unfamiliar space. The bed was impossibly soft, the linens crisp and fresh. Everything about the room spoke of careful attention to detail and comfort. A gentle knock at the door preceded Miss Geneva's warm voice. "Good morning, dear. Breakfast will be served in 15 minutes if you'd like to join us." "Thank you, I'll be right down," Zoe called back, pushing aside the covers. In the attached bathroom, she found everything she needed already laid out. Fresh towels, toiletries, even a new toothbrush still in its packaging. The thoughtfulness of it all touched her deeply. Dressed in a simple blouse and slacks from the wardrobe Rylan had provided, Zoe made her way to the breakfast room. The morning light filled the space, making the polished wood table glow. Miss Geneva was arranging a plate of fresh fruit, while Rylan sat reading the morning paper. "Good morning," he said, folding the paper and standing as she entered. The gesture, so old-fashioned and courteous, brought a small smile to her face. "Good morning," she replied, taking the seat Miss Geneva indicated. "I hope you like French toast," Miss Geneva said, placing a steaming plate before her. "It's an old family recipe." The breakfast spread was impressive. French toast dusted with powdered sugar, fresh berries, crispy bacon, and coffee that smelled heavenly. As they began to eat, the atmosphere felt surprisingly normal, almost domestic. "I was wondering," Rylan said after a while, "if you might like to join me tomorrow morning. There's a small community church I attend. Nothing fancy, but the people are genuine and welcoming." Zoe looked up, surprised both by the invitation and the fact that he attended church regularly. "I'd like that," she said softly. Her own faith had been a source of strength through difficult times, and the thought of attending service helped normalize this strange situation. Miss Geneva beamed. "Pastor Roberts gives wonderful sermons. You'll feel right at home there." As breakfast wound down, Miss Geneva began clearing the dishes. "Now, what are your plans for dinner tonight?" she asked. "I could prepare something." "Actually," Zoe spoke up, "I was thinking, if it's all right, I'd like to cook. My grandmother's southern stew recipe is pretty special." "That sounds wonderful," Ryland said, his face lighting up with genuine interest. "I could try my hand at cornbread to go with it?" Miss Geneva's eyebrows rose slightly, and Zoe caught a hint of amusement in her expression. "I'll make sure the kitchen is stocked with everything you need," she said, hiding a smile. That afternoon, the kitchen became a workspace of shared effort and unexpected joy. Zoe tied an apron around her waist, laying out ingredients for her grandmother's stew, fresh vegetables, tender chunks of beef, and her secret blend of seasonings. Rylan, sleeves rolled up and looking decidedly less CEO-like, consulted a recipe on his tablet. "How hard can cornbread be?" he mused, measuring flour with careful precision. "Have you ever made it before?" Zoe asked, trying not to smile at his serious expression. "Well, no," he admitted, "but I've eaten plenty of it." As Zoe chopped vegetables and browned meat, the kitchen filled with warm, savory aromas. She found herself sharing stories about learning to cook at her grandmother's knee, about summer afternoons spent shelling peas on the front porch. "Your grandmother sounds like an amazing woman," Ryland said, carefully mixing his cornbread batter. "She was," Zoe agreed softly. "She taught me that good food is about more than just eating. It's about sharing love." Ryland's first attempt at cornbread came out slightly lopsided but golden brown. His proud expression made Zoe laugh, a real, genuine laugh that surprised her with its ease. "It's not pretty, but let's hope it tastes good," he said, setting it to cool. The stew simmered on the stove, filling the kitchen with memories of home. As Zoe stirred it, she found herself relaxing into the familiar routine of cooking. Even Miss Geneva drifted in occasionally, offering approving nods at the progress. When they finally sat down to eat, the dining room felt warmer somehow, less formal than before. The stew was perfect, rich and comforting, and Ryland's cornbread, though slightly misshapen, had a surprisingly good texture. "This is incredible," Ryland said after his first bite of stew. "Your grandmother would be proud." They talked easily over dinner, sharing stories and simple observations. Miss Geneva joined them, adding her own warmth to the conversation. For a few hours, Zoe almost forgot about the circumstances that had brought her here. Later that night, back in her room, Zoe stood at the window, looking out at the moonlit gardens. The day had been unexpected. In her heart, she had to admit that dinner had felt peaceful, almost normal. The tension she'd been carrying since the wedding had eased slightly, replaced by something softer. As she got ready for bed, she thought about how Rylan had looked in the kitchen, focused so intently on his cornbread, how his face had lit up when she laughed. She thought about Miss Geneva's maternal presence and the way the three of them had talked over dinner like family. Sitting on the edge of her bed, Zoe acknowledged a truth she hadn't expected. For the first time since arriving at the estate, she had felt something close to peace. It wasn't complete, and it didn't erase the complexity of her situation, but it was real as the comfort of her grandmother's stew recipe, as honest as Ryland's imperfect cornbread. She turned out the light, letting the quiet of the estate settle around her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, this moment of peace was enough. Sunday morning dawned with golden light streaming through Zoe's windows. She stood before the mirror, smoothing down a modest navy dress she'd found in the closet. The fit was perfect, another reminder of how thoroughly Rylan had planned for her arrival. She pinned her hair back simply, adding small pearl earrings that Miss Geneva had lent her. A gentle knock at her door announced Miss Geneva herself, dressed elegantly in a cream-colored suit. "You look lovely, dear," she said warmly. "Are you ready?" Zoe nodded, though her stomach fluttered with nerves. "I haven't been to church in a while," she admitted softly. "Don't worry." Miss Geneva patted her arm. "Our congregation is small and welcoming. Pastor Elijah has a way of making everyone feel at home." They found Rylan waiting in the foyer, looking distinguished in a charcoal grey suit. His eyes lingered on Zoe for a moment, and she felt her cheeks warm under his gaze. The drive to church was peaceful, winding through tree-lined streets as Miss Geneva pointed out local landmarks. The church itself was modest, a white painted building with a simple steeple reaching toward the morning sky. As they approached the entrance, Zoe noticed how people greeted Rylan with genuine warmth rather than the deference she'd expected for someone of his status. He seemed to know everyone by name, asking about family members and recent events with sincere interest. "Ah, Rylan!" A distinguished-looking man in his 50s approached them, his smile broad and welcoming. "And this must be Zoe." "Pastor Elijah," Rylan said warmly. "Yes, this is my wife, Zoe." The words still felt surreal to her ears, but Pastor Elijah's kind eyes and gentle handshake put her at ease. "Welcome to our church family, Zoe. We're so glad you're here." Inside, sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across worn wooden pews. The congregation was indeed small, perhaps 60 people, and Zoe found herself relaxing as several women introduced themselves with genuine friendliness. They sat near the front, Miss Geneva on one side of Zoe and Rylan on the other. As the service began, Zoe was struck by the simple beauty of the familiar hymns. The congregation sang with heartfelt conviction, their voices blending in harmony. When Pastor Elijah stepped up to deliver his sermon, his presence filled the small sanctuary. "Today," he began, his voice resonant and warm, "we're going to talk about unexpected deliverance." Zoe felt her breath catch. She sensed Rylan shift slightly beside her. "Sometimes," Pastor Elijah continued, "God's help comes in ways we never imagined, like Moses finding safety in Pharaoh's palace or Ruth finding protection through Boaz. The Lord often works through unexpected circumstances and people to bring about His purposes." As the pastor spoke, weaving scripture with practical wisdom, Zoe found herself drawn in by his words. He spoke of how fear of the unexpected could blind us to God's provision, how sometimes what seemed like disruption was actually divine intervention. "When we're faced with sudden change," Pastor Elijah said, making eye contact with various members of the congregation, "our first instinct might be resistance. But I encourage you to look deeper. Ask yourself, could this unexpected turn be God's way of delivering you to something better?" Tears pricked at Zoe's eyes. She felt Rylan's hand move closer to hers on the pew, not quite touching, but offering silent support. After the service, several couples approached to welcome them, and Zoe was touched by their genuine interest in getting to know her. There was no hint of judgment or curiosity about the sudden marriage, just authentic warmth and acceptance. "There's a little diner just down the street," Rylan suggested as they left the church. "They serve the best Sunday lunch in town. What do you think?" The diner was cheerfully retro, with red vinyl booths and chrome accents. Several other church members were there, creating a comfortable community atmosphere. The hostess led them to a corner booth with a view of the street. As they settled in, their waitress approached with a bright smile. "Rylan, haven't seen you in a while." "Hello, Martha." He smiled. "I'd like you to meet my wife, Zoe." The word sent an unexpected thrill through Zoe's heart. The pride in his voice when he said, "my wife," made her cheeks flush. "Well, isn't that wonderful?" Martha beamed. "Welcome to our little community, honey. Now what can I get you folks to drink?" Over plates of home-style cooking, they talked about the sermon, with Miss Geneva sharing her own stories of unexpected blessings. Zoe watched Rylan interact with other diners who stopped by their table, struck by how different he was from the corporate CEO she'd first met. Here, he was simply part of the community, genuine and unguarded. The afternoon sun was lowering when they returned to the estate. Miss Geneva excused herself for her Sunday rest, leaving Rylan and Zoe alone. "Would you like to walk in the gardens?" he asked softly. The roses are particularly beautiful at this hour. The gardens were indeed lovely, the evening light casting long shadows across manicured paths. They walked in comfortable silence until they reached a stone bench near a fountain. "I've thought about you every day since that night," Rylan said quietly, his voice barely audible above the water's gentle splash. "Your courage, your composure under pressure. How you didn't hesitate to help a stranger in need." Zoe's heart quickened. She remembered that night, the sound of struggle, her instinctive rush to help, applying pressure to his wound while waiting for the ambulance. She hadn't known who he was then. "I wasn't trying to be brave," she said softly. "It was just the right thing to do." "That's exactly what I mean." He turned to face her. "You act from your heart without calculation. It's rare, Zoe. You're rare." His words left her feeling both exposed and cherished, as if he could see straight through to her soul. The evening light caught his face, highlighting the genuine admiration in his expression. For the first time since their sudden marriage, Zoe felt truly seen, not as a problem to be solved or a person to be protected, but as herself. The moment hung between them, fragile and precious, as the garden settled into evening's embrace. The evening air was crisp as Zoe helped Miss Geneva fold fresh linens in the estate's spacious laundry room. The repetitive motion of smoothing sheets and matching corners brought her an unexpected sense of peace. "You have quite the touch with linens," Miss Geneva observed warmly, her experienced hands creating perfect hospital corners. "Most young folks these days don't appreciate the art of proper folding." Zoe smiled, inhaling the clean scent of lavender fabric softener. "I learned in the nursing home. There's something calming about it, isn't there?" "Indeed there is, child. Order from chaos, that's what I always say." Miss Geneva's wise eyes studied her face. "You seem more settled today. The church service did you good." Before Zoe could respond, rapid footsteps echoed down the hallway. Daniel Pierce, Ryland's security chief, appeared in the doorway, his usually stoic expression tight with concern. "Ms. Bennett," he said formally, "your sister is at the gates. She appears distressed." Zoe's heart lurched. She dropped the pillowcase she'd been folding. "Naomi, is she hurt?" "She's agitated but physically unharmed. We're escorting her to the sitting room now." Ms. Geneva touched Zoe's arm. "Go on, dear. I'll finish up here." Hurrying through the estate's polished corridors, Zoe's mind raced with possibilities. When she reached the sitting room, she barely recognized the woman pacing between the elegant furniture. Naomi had lost weight, her designer clothes hanging loose on her frame. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her normally perfectly styled hair was disheveled. When she saw Zoe, she rushed forward. "Zoe! Oh, thank God!" Her voice cracked as she grabbed her sister's hands. "I've been trying to figure out how to reach you safely." "Naomi, what's happened to you?" Zoe guided her to sit on the plush sofa, noting how her twin's hands trembled. "You look exhausted." "I'm in trouble, Zoe. Deeper than I told you before." Naomi's eyes darted around the room, landing briefly on Daniel, who stood discreetly by the door. She lowered her voice. "And I'm worried about you too." "What do you mean?" Zoe felt her stomach tighten. "Does this have something to do with the syndicate Rylan mentioned?" Naomi's face paled. "So he told you about them? Did he tell you why they're really interested in him?" "They're involved in identity theft. They were targeting my credentials." "That's only part of it." Naomi leaned closer, her voice barely a whisper. The syndicate wants something specific from Rylan, a patent, some kind of revolutionary technology worth billions. They've been trying to get to it for months. Zoe felt the room tilt slightly. What are you saying? Think about it, Zoe. Why would a powerful CEO suddenly marry someone he barely knows? The timing is too perfect. Naomi's eyes filled with tears. What if he's using you, creating a sympathetic story, or maybe even planning to use you as leverage if things go wrong? No. Zoe stood up, her legs unsteady. You don't know him. He's not like that. Neither of us knows him, not really. Naomi rose too, swaying slightly. I had to warn you. Be careful, please. Don't trust everything at face value. The sound of a car pulling up outside made Naomi freeze. That'll be him. I can't be here when he arrives. She moved toward a side door, then turned back. Watch yourself, sister, and I'm sorry for everything. Before Zoe could respond, Naomi slipped out, leaving only the lingering scent of her familiar perfume. Daniel moved to follow her, but stopped at Zoe's gesture. Let her go, Zoe said softly. She's scared enough. Moments later, Ryland's footsteps echoed in the hall. He appeared in the doorway, his tie loosened after a long day of meetings. His expression changed instantly when he saw Zoe's face. What's wrong? He crossed the room quickly. Has something happened? Naomi was here. Zoe watched his reaction carefully. She just left. Ryland's jaw tightened. He glanced at Daniel, who nodded confirmation. Did she say why she came? She had concerns. Zoe wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the room's warmth. About the syndicate, about you. I see. Ryland's voice was carefully neutral. And what do you think about these concerns? Zoe met his gaze, searching for truth in his deep brown eyes. I think I need some time to think. He nodded slowly. Of course, whatever you need. Later that night, Zoe lay in her bed, staring at the shadowed ceiling. Naomi's words circled through her mind like restless birds. The patent, the timing, the sudden marriage. Could it all be calculated? Was she seeing only what she wanted to see in Ryland's kindness? She rolled onto her side, pulling the covers tighter around her shoulders. The moon cast silver light through her window, creating patterns on the wall that seemed to shift and change, just like her certainties. Sleep remained elusive as questions echoed in her thoughts. What was real? What was strategy? And most troubling of all, was her heart leading her toward truth, or straight into carefully laid deception? Morning sunlight streamed through the estate's windows, but it brought Zoe no comfort. She had barely slept, Naomi's warnings echoing through her mind all night. Now, standing in the hallway outside Ryland's home office, her heart pounded against her ribs. She shouldn't be doing this. The thought nagged at her as she turned the unlocked door handle. But she needed answers, real ones, not the careful explanations Ryland had been feeding her. The office was immaculate, all sleek mahogany and leather. Zoe moved quietly to his desk, her hands trembling as she began looking through the papers laid out neatly in folders. Most were standard business documents, contracts, reports, meeting minutes. Then she found it. A thick folder labeled Board Meeting Minutes, Confidential, caught her eye. Inside, discussions about company image and leadership stability filled page after page. Her breath caught as she read a highlighted section. The board strongly recommends CEO Drake consider marriage within the next 6 months to project stability and family values to shareholders. Recent market analysis shows family-oriented leadership correlates with increased investor confidence. The date was just 2 months before their wedding. Zoe's legs went weak. She sank into Ryland's leather chair, the document shaking in her hands. More passages jumped out at her. Drake's single status remains a concern. Marriage could offset negative press from recent patent disputes. Timing critical for shareholder meeting. Hot tears blurred her vision. She had been such a fool. All his kindness, his gentle attention, was it just carefully calculated corporate strategy? Had he seen her sister's desperate situation as the perfect opportunity to fulfill his board's wishes? The sound of a door closing somewhere in the house startled her. Quickly she returned the folder to its place and slipped out of the office, her mind made up. She couldn't stay here, couldn't keep pretending this was real when it was all just business. In her room, she threw clothes into her overnight bag, not caring about neatness. Her hands shook so badly she could barely zip it closed. A soft knock at her door made her jump. "Miss Zoe!" Miss Geneva's concerned voice came through the wood. "Are you all right, child?" "I'm fine," Zoe called back, hating how her voice cracked. Just need some air." She waited until Miss Geneva's footsteps faded before opening the door. The house felt suffocating now, every luxury a reminder of how easily she'd been manipulated. She made it halfway down the grand staircase when Rylan walked through the front door. He stopped short, taking in her tear-stained face and packed bag. "Zoe?" His voice was soft, concerned. "What's wrong?" "Don't." She held up a hand when he started toward her. "Please don't pretend anymore." "Pretend?" He looked genuinely confused. "I don't understand." "I found the board meeting minutes." The words felt like glass in her throat. "About how you needed to get married, for stability optics, for the shareholders." Understanding dawned on his face, followed quickly by alarm. "It's not what you think, isn't it?" Zoe descended the remaining stairs, keeping distance between them. "The timing was perfect, wasn't it? My sister in trouble, me desperate to help her. Did you plan it all? Wait for the right moment to use our situation?" "No, listen to me." He reached for her arm, but she jerked away. "I trusted you." Her voice broke. "I actually started to believe. But it was all just business, wasn't it? A corporate strategy with a convenient story attached." "Zoe, please." The pain in his voice almost made her waver. "Let me explain." "I think you've explained enough." She moved past him towards the door. "I won't be part of your shareholder presentation anymore. You're not safe out there alone." His words followed her onto the front steps. "The syndicate is probably just another part of your story." She kept walking, vision blurred with tears. "Goodbye, Rylan." The long ride home was a blur of city streets and quiet tears. When she finally climbed the stairs to her apartment, her aunt was waiting in the doorway. "Lord have mercy," Aunt Laverne breathed, taking in Zoe's appearance. "Come here, child." Zoe fell into her aunt's arms, the tears coming harder now. Laverne guided her to the couch, holding her close like she had when Zoe was small. "Tell me everything," her aunt said softly. So Zoe did. The board meetings, the timing, her fears about being used. Aunt Laverne listened quietly, stroking her hair. "You really believe that man could fake everything?" she asked when Zoe finished. "The way he looks at you?" "I don't know what to believe anymore." Zoe's voice was hoarse. I feel so stupid." "Rest now," Aunt Laverne said, draping a soft blanket over her. "Things might look different in the morning." But as Zoe drifted into an exhausted sleep on the couch, nothing felt clear except the ache in her heart. She had let herself believe in something beautiful, only to find it was built on corporate strategy and careful manipulation. Outside, across the quiet street, a dark figure stood in the shadows of an alley, watching the warm light from her apartment window. Their phone glowed briefly as they sent a text. "Target location confirmed." The morning sun barely warmed the crisp autumn air as Zoe helped Mia into her jacket. Her niece's cheerful chatter provided a welcome distraction from the hollow ache in her chest. "Can we have pizza for dinner?" Mia asked, struggling with her zipper. "Here, let me help." Zoe knelt down, fixing the stuck zipper. "We'll see what Aunt Laverne says, okay?" The walk to Mia's preschool was only 3 blocks, but Zoe found herself constantly looking over her shoulder. Last night's rest hadn't brought any clarity, just a lingering sense of unease she couldn't shake. "Why are you sad?" Mia's small hand squeezed hers. Zoe forced a smile. "Just tired, sweetie. Look, there's your school." After dropping Mia off, Zoe headed to Riverside Pharmacy. Aunt Laverne's arthritis medication needed refilling, and the familiar errand felt grounding. Normal, everything she'd left Ryland's estate to reclaim. The pharmacy was quiet, just a few elderly customers browsing the aisles. Zoe got in line at the prescription counter, her mind wandering to the breakfast she'd shared with Ryland just yesterday morning. The way he'd smiled when she'd teased him about burning the toast. Bennett prescription. The pharmacist's voice snapped her back to reality. "Yes, for Laverne Bennett." Zoe dug out her aunt's insurance card. While waiting, she noticed 2 men enter the store. Something about their purposeful stride made her stomach clench. They weren't browsing. Their eyes scanned the store with predatory focus. "Here you go, Ms. Bennett." The pharmacist handed over a white paper bag. Zoe clutched it close, hurrying towards the exit. The men were blocking the main aisle now. Her hands grew clammy as she tried to edge past them. "Hey, Naomi." One man stepped directly into her path. He wore an expensive suit that couldn't quite hide his muscled build. "We need to talk." Zoe's throat went dry. Don't play games." The second man moved behind her, cutting off her retreat. "You know what you owe us." "I'm not Naomi." Her voice shook. "Please, I'm her sister." "Sure you are." The first man grabbed her arm. "Let's discuss this outside." Zoe saw the dark sedan idling at the curb, its back door open. Pure terror shot through her. She yanked her arm free and shoved the pharmacy bag into the man's face. White pills scattered across the floor as she bolted. "Get her!" She made it 3 steps before strong hands seized her shoulders. Zoe screamed, kicking backwards as they tried to drag her towards the door. Other customers stared in shock, no one moving to help. Suddenly, the grip on her right side vanished. She heard a grunt of pain and glimpsed a blur of dark clothing as someone tackled her attacker. More figures in tactical gear swarmed through the door, Ryland's security team. She realized with a surge of relief. The man still holding her left arm cursed and yanked her roughly. Something metallic glinted in his other hand, a knife. Zoe's scream caught in her throat. "Let her go." The command cut through the chaos. Ryland stood in the doorway, his usual composed demeanor replaced by cold fury. His security chief, Daniel, had the first attacker pinned face down, while 2 other team members moved to flank the man holding Zoe. "Stay back." Her captor pressed the knife closer. "Or I'll—" He never finished the threat. Zoe drove her elbow backward into his solar plexus, just as Aunt Laverne had taught her years ago. His grip loosened for a split second, enough for her to wrench free. She stumbled forward, legs weak with fear. Strong arms caught her, and she found herself pressed against Ryland's chest as he pivoted, placing his body between her and danger. Through tear-blurred eyes, she saw her attacker lunge with the knife. "No!" she cried out, clutching Ryland's jacket. The security team converged, but not before the blade sliced toward them. Ryland's arms tightened protectively around her as chaos erupted. The knife flashed in the fluorescent pharmacy lights as Ryland twisted to shield Zoe. A sharp cry of pain escaped him as the blade sliced through his suit jacket, cutting deep into his forearm. Blood immediately began seeping through the expensive fabric. "Ryland!" Zoe's scream echoed through the store. The security team tackled the attacker, but he and his partner managed to break free, shoving past terrified customers as they fled toward the exit. Distant sirens wailed, growing louder by the second. "Stay with them!" Daniel barked orders to his team. "Don't let them escape!" Zoe barely registered the chaos around her as Ryland sagged against the pharmacy counter, his face pale. His right arm was drenched in crimson from elbow to wrist. "Let me see," she commanded, her nursing instincts taking over despite her trembling hands. She carefully pushed back his torn sleeve, revealing a deep gash about 6 inches long. "I'm fine." Ryland tried to reassure her, but his voice was tight with pain. "You're not fine." Zoe grabbed paper towels from the pharmacy counter. "We need to apply pressure." She pressed the makeshift bandage firmly against the wound, making him wince. "The ambulance is 2 minutes out," Daniel reported, returning to their side. His normally stoic expression showed clear concern for his boss. "I don't need—" Ryland started to protest. "Yes, you do." Zoe cut him off. "This needs stitches." Her voice cracked as the reality of what had just happened hit her. "You could have been killed trying to protect me." Ryland's good hand came up to cup her cheek, thumb brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "Better me than you," he said softly. The paramedics burst through the doors moments later, quickly taking control of the situation. As they worked to stabilize Ryland's arm, Zoe found herself unable to step away from his side. When they moved to load him onto the stretcher, she gripped his hand tightly. "I'm riding with him," she told the paramedics, her tone leaving no room for argument. The ambulance ride was a blur of sirens and medical terminology. Zoe kept her fingers intertwined with Ryland's while the paramedics monitored his vitals and changed the blood-soaked bandages. "I'm sorry," Ryland murmured, his face drawn with guilt. "I failed you. I should have had better security in place." "Don't." Zoe squeezed his hand. "You saved my life. Those men would have taken me if you hadn't been watching over me, even after I left." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "I was wrong about you, wasn't I? So wrong." Before Ryland could respond, they arrived at the hospital. Miss Geneva was already waiting at the emergency entrance, her usual calm demeanor replaced by visible distress. "Oh, my dear ones," she breathed, hurrying to meet the stretcher. Her weathered hands clasped Ryland's shoulder, then Zoe's. When Daniel called, "I'm all right, Geneva," Ryland assured her, though the pallor of his skin suggested otherwise. The emergency team whisked them into a treatment room where doctors quickly assessed the wound. "You'll need surgery to repair some of the deeper tissue damage," the lead physician explained. "Nothing major, but we need to do it now to prevent complications." Zoe's heart clenched at the word surgery. She knew it was relatively minor, but after the terror of the attack, any additional risk seemed unbearable. "Stay with Geneva," Ryland told her as nurses prepared to take him to the operating room. "I'll be fine." But Zoe walked alongside the gurney until they reached the surgical ward doors, holding his hand the entire way. Only when the nurses gently insisted did she finally let go, watching through tear-blurred vision as they wheeled him away. Miss Geneva's arm wrapped around her shoulders. "Come, child, let's find somewhere to sit and pray while we wait." Zoe turned into the older woman's embrace, her body shaking with delayed shock and emotion. The image of Ryland stepping between her and the knife played over and over in her mind. She'd believed his marriage to her was just corporate manipulation, but a man didn't take a knife for someone he was merely using. She'd been so wrong about everything. The waiting room clock ticked away hours that felt like days. Zoe alternated between pacing and sitting with her head bowed in prayer beside Miss Geneva. Finally, around 6 in the evening, a nurse emerged with welcome news. "Mr. Drake is out of surgery and in recovery. Everything went well. He's starting to wake up, but he's still quite groggy from the anesthesia. Relief flooded through Zoe's body. Can we see him? 2 visitors at a time, just for a few minutes. The nurse agreed, leading them down a quiet hallway. Rylan lay propped up slightly in the hospital bed, his injured arm carefully bandaged and elevated on a pillow. His eyes were closed, but they fluttered open as Zoe and Miss Geneva approached. Though still pale, some colour had returned to his face. "Hey," he murmured, voice rough from the breathing tube they'd used during surgery. Zoe immediately moved to his bedside, taking his uninjured hand. "Hey yourself. How are you feeling?" "Like I've been hit by a truck," he admitted with a weak smile. "But I'll live." Miss Geneva patted his shoulder gently. "You gave us quite a scare, young man. Sorry about that." His eyes drifted closed again, the medication making it hard to stay awake. "Rest," Miss Geneva said softly. "We'll be right here." As Rylan dozed off, the older woman touched Zoe's arm. "Come with me for a moment, dear. There are some things you need to know." Reluctantly, Zoe followed Miss Geneva to a small waiting area just outside Rylan's room. The evening sun streamed through the windows, painting everything in warm, golden light. "Sit down," Miss Geneva said, settling into one of the chairs. When Zoe joined her, the older woman took both her hands. "I've known Rylan for 15 years, since he was just starting to build his company. I've watched him grow from an ambitious young man into someone I'm proud to consider a son. And in all that time, I've never seen him as torn up about anything as he was about you." Zoe's throat tightened. "What do you mean?" "That night, years ago, when you saved his life, he never forgot it. He tried everything to find you, hired private investigators, searched medical records, even went back to that street corner hoping to spot you again." Miss Geneva's eyes were gentle but intense. "He said there was something special about you. Not just that you helped him, but the way you did it. How calm you stayed. How kind you were even in such a frightening situation." Zoe remembered that night clearly. Finding the badly beaten man in the alley, calling 911 while keeping pressure on his wounds, talking to him softly to keep him conscious until help arrived. She'd never known it was Rylan Drake. When his board started pushing him to get married, saying the company needed a more stable image, he refused every suggestion they made. Miss Geneva continued. "They paraded eligible women in front of him for months, socialites, executives, old money families. He wouldn't even consider it. But then he married me," Zoe said quietly. "Because of Naomi's involvement with the syndicate." "No, child. He married you because when he finally found you again, through Naomi's modeling connection to his company, he discovered you were in danger. The marriage wasn't about leverage or corporate image. It was about protecting the woman he'd never stopped thinking about." Tears spilled down Zoe's cheeks as the truth of everything hit her. "I've been so stupid," she whispered. "I let Naomi's warnings and that board paperwork convince me it was all manipulation, but he was just trying to keep me safe. He's loved you since before you knew his name," Miss Geneva said softly. "Everything else, the board's pressure, the timing, even the way he had to go about it, those were just circumstances he had to work around to do what his heart was telling him to do." Zoe buried her face in her hands, shoulders shaking. "And I doubted him. I ran away. Then today he almost died protecting me anyway." Miss Geneva wrapped her in a maternal embrace. "Love forgives, dear one. And that man in there, he loves you more than I've ever seen anyone love another person." After a few minutes, Zoe wiped her eyes and stood up. "I need to see him." "Go on." Miss Geneva smiled. "I'll get us all some coffee. Something tells me it's going to be a long night." Returning to Rylan's room, Zoe found him awake again, watching the door as if waiting for her. She walked to his bedside and took his hand. I'm so sorry, she whispered, voice thick with emotion. I should have trusted you. Instead, I let fear and doubt convince me you had ulterior motives. Hey, he said softly, squeezing her fingers. You had every reason to be cautious. I didn't exactly go about things in the most conventional way. Miss Geneva told me everything, about how you tried to find me all these years, how you refused to marry for business reasons. She brought his hand to her cheek, letting her tears fall freely. She told me you've loved me since that night in the alley. Ryland's thumb brushed away her tears. I have, he admitted. There was something special about you, something pure and brave and beautiful. I never stopped thinking about the angel who saved my life and then disappeared. Zoe leaned down, pressing a gentle kiss to his forehead. I'm sorry, she whispered against his skin. I should have trusted you. His good hand came up to cup the back of her neck, keeping her close. Stay with me? He asked softly. I'm not going anywhere, she promised. And this time, she meant it with all her heart. The morning sun painted golden streaks across the sterile hospital room, casting a warm glow on Ryland's sleeping face. Zoe hadn't left his side all night, dozing occasionally in the uncomfortable visitor's chair, but mostly watching the steady rise and fall of his chest. Her hand remained intertwined with his, unwilling to break the connection even in sleep. As the sunlight touched his face, Ryland's eyes fluttered open. For a moment he seemed disoriented, but then his gaze found Zoe and softened with relief and love. You're still here, he murmured, voice rough from sleep. Of course I am. Zoe squeezed his hand gently. How are you feeling? Like I got into a fight with a knife and lost. He attempted to joke, then winced as he shifted position. But having you here makes it better. Zoe took a deep breath, gathering her courage. Ryland, I need to tell you something. He looked at her expectantly, thumb brushing over her knuckles in that gentle way that made her heart flutter. I want this marriage, she said softly. Not because I need protection, or because circumstances forced us together, but because, she swallowed hard, because my heart wants it, wants you. Tears welled in Ryland's eyes, something she'd never seen before. His grip on her hand tightened. Are you sure? He whispered. After everything that's happened? Everything that's happened has shown me exactly who you are, Zoe said, reaching up to cup his cheek. A man who spent years looking for someone just to thank them, who married me to keep me safe, even though you could have just offered security, who took a knife meant for me without hesitation. Her voice cracked. How could I not love someone like that? A tear slipped down Ryland's cheek as he turned his face to kiss her palm. I've loved you for so long, he admitted, even when I only had the memory of your kindness to hold on to. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, just absorbing the truth of their feelings, until Ryland spoke again. We need to talk about Naomi. Zoe nodded, knowing this conversation was inevitable. She's in trouble. Real trouble. The syndicate she's involved with. They're dangerous people, Ryland said carefully. But we can help her, Zoe. I have connections in law enforcement who can arrange a safe surrender. She can get protection in exchange for information. You'd do that, even after everything she's done? She's your sister, and now she's my family too. He squeezed her hand. We'll help her find a way out. Before Zoe could respond, there was a soft knock at the door. Miss Geneva poked her head in, smiling warmly. Look who I found in the waiting room. She opened the door wider to reveal Mia and Aunt Laverne. Mia immediately ran to the bed, only slowing when Miss Geneva gently reminded her to be careful. Uncle Ryland! she exclaimed, reaching for his good hand. "Aunt Geneva said you got hurt protecting Auntie Zoe, like a superhero." Rylan chuckled, though Zoe saw him blink back tears at being called Uncle. "Well, your Auntie Zoe is pretty special. She's worth protecting." Aunt Laverne approached more slowly, her expression a mix of concern and approval. "So you're the man who married my niece?" she said, studying him. "The one who's been watching over her even when she didn't know it?" "Yes, Mom," Rylan replied respectfully. "And you took a knife for her. I'd do it again in a heartbeat." Aunt Laverne's face softened. "Well then, I suppose you'll do." She turned to Zoe. "Girl, sometimes the Lord works in mysterious ways, but I'd say he knew exactly what he was doing here." Miss Geneva came forward with a basket of muffins she'd baked. "I thought we could all have a proper family breakfast. The doctor said Rylan can be discharged this afternoon if his vitals stay stable." As they shared the fresh muffins and coffee Miss Geneva had brought, Zoe looked around at the unlikely family gathered in the hospital room. Mia was perched carefully on the edge of Rylan's bed, chattering about her preschool art project. Aunt Laverne and Miss Geneva had already fallen into an animated discussion about recipe exchanges. And Rylan, her husband, she thought with a surge of joy, watched it all with contentment, his hand still firmly holding hers. Later that afternoon, a nurse arrived with discharge papers and a wheelchair. "Hospital policy," she explained when Rylan tried to protest. "Don't argue," Zoe said firmly. "You were stabbed yesterday. You're using the wheelchair." Rylan gave in with good grace, allowing Zoe to help him into the chair while Miss Geneva gathered his belongings and Aunt Laverne took Mia to bring the car around. As Zoe pushed the wheelchair toward the exit, Rylan reached up to cover her hand on the handle with his. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" "For staying. For giving us a real chance. For making me the happiest man alive." Zoe leaned down to press a kiss to the top of his head. "Thank you for never giving up on finding me." Their fingers remained intertwined as they made their way to the waiting car, ready to face whatever came next, together. The morning after Rylan's release from the hospital, Zoe sat with him in his home office as he made several careful phone calls. His arm was still bandaged, but his determination was unwavering as he worked his connections to help Naomi. "I have a friend in the Federal Bureau of Investigation," he explained to Zoe between calls. "She specializes in organized crime cases. She'll make sure Naomi is protected when she comes in." Miss Geneva brought them coffee and homemade scones, hovering protectively. "How are you feeling, Rylan? Don't overtire yourself." "I'm fine," he assured her, though Zoe noticed he winced slightly when reaching for his coffee cup. By afternoon, they had arranged a secure meeting at a federal building downtown. Zoe called her sister, her heart pounding. "Naomi, we can help you, but you have to trust us." There was a long pause on the other end. "I'm scared, dear," Naomi whispered, using their childhood nickname. "These people, they'll kill me if they find out. That's why we've arranged protection. Please, Naomi, let us help you make this right." Another pause, then, "Okay, tell me where to go." The next morning, Zoe and Rylan accompanied Naomi to meet with federal agents. Naomi looked thin and nervous, but her spine straightened as she walked into the building. For 6 hours, she detailed everything she knew about the syndicate's operations, the identity theft schemes, the corporate espionage, the threats. "You've given us exactly what we needed," the lead agent told her. "We'll move you to a safe location tonight. When this goes to trial, your testimony will be crucial." Naomi turned to Zoe, tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry. For everything. For putting you in danger. For lying about the wedding setup. I was desperate and scared, but that's no excuse." Zoe pulled her sister into a tight hug. "I know, but you're doing the right thing now. That's what matters." While the authorities worked to dismantle the syndicate, Rylan insisted on moving Aunt Laverne and Mia to the estate. Just until we're certain everyone involved is in custody, he explained. The security here is excellent. Aunt Laverne surveyed the grand house with raised eyebrows. Well, I suppose we could rough it here for a while, she said dryly, making Miss Geneva laugh. Mia was simply delighted. She immediately claimed a bedroom with a window seat overlooking the gardens, where she set up her stuffed animals and art supplies. Can we stay forever? She asked hopefully. We'll see, Sweet Pea, Aunt Laverne told her, but she shared a meaningful look with Zoe. Over the next couple of days, a new rhythm developed in the house. Mornings began with Miss Geneva and Aunt Laverne comparing recipes in the kitchen, while Mia colored at the breakfast table. Rylan worked from his home office, taking breaks to join Zoe for walks in the garden or help Mia with her reading. In the evenings, they gathered in the kitchen to cook together. Zoe taught Rylan her grandmother's cornbread recipe, while he showed her how to make his mother's pasta sauce. They moved around each other with growing ease, passing ingredients and stealing quick touches. I never thought I'd have this, Rylan admitted one night as they stood at the sink washing dishes together. A real family, a home filled with love instead of just expensive furniture. Zoe bumped his shoulder gently with hers. I never thought I'd trust anyone enough to let them in completely, but you showed me it was safe to try. After dinner, they often sat on the veranda watching the sunset, talking about everything and nothing. Rylan spoke about losing his parents young and building his company to prove himself. Zoe shared stories of raising Mia while working double shifts, of always being the responsible twin while Naomi chased dangerous dreams. I was so angry when I thought you'd married me just for business reasons, Zoe confessed one evening. I couldn't bear the idea that what felt so real to me was just strategy to you. Rylan took her hand, running his thumb over her wedding ring. I wanted to tell you everything from the start, but I was afraid you'd run if you knew how long I'd been looking for you, how much you meant to me before you even knew my name. I might have, she admitted. I wasn't ready then to believe in that kind of love, but I am now. As they settled into their new life together, Rylan suggested holding a proper wedding ceremony. Not because our first one wasn't legal, he explained, but because this time we're choosing it with our whole hearts. No secrets, no fears, just love. Zoe's eyes filled with tears as she nodded. Yes, I want to stand before God and our family and promise myself to you, for real, this time. They planned a small ceremony in the estate's garden for the following week. Miss Geneva and Aunt Laverne threw themselves into the preparations, while Mia practiced her flower girl duties with serious dedication. The night before the ceremony, Zoe stood on the balcony outside their bedroom, gazing out over the moonlit gardens where they would exchange their vows tomorrow. The air was sweet with jasmine, and somewhere in the distance, crickets sang their evening chorus. She closed her eyes and folded her hands in prayer. Thank you, Lord, she whispered, for second chances and unexpected blessings, for showing me that love doesn't have to hurt, for bringing me home to a family I never knew I needed. A gentle breeze stirred her hair, carrying the promise of tomorrow's joy. In the garden below, the white roses they'd chosen for the ceremony glowed softly in the moonlight, like stars fallen to earth to witness her gratitude. The following afternoon painted a perfect scene in the Drake Estate gardens. Late summer sunshine filtered through the oak trees, casting dappled shadows across chairs lined with ivory ribbons. The air carried the sweet perfume of roses and jasmine from the carefully tended flower beds that Miss Geneva had nurtured for years. Church members from their small congregation mingled with Drake Corporation staff, creating a warm atmosphere of community. Aunt Laverne fussed over arrangements of white hydrangeas and baby's breath, while security personnel discreetly monitored the perimeter, ensuring everyone's safety. In the guest suite, Zoe stood before a full-length mirror, smoothing the simple lines of her ivory gown. Unlike the ornate designer dress from her first wedding, this one reflected her true spirit, elegant but understated, with delicate lace at the shoulders and a flowing skirt that moved like water when she walked. "You look absolutely beautiful," Miss Geneva said softly, adjusting Zoe's veil. "Like an angel." Zoe's eyes misted as she turned to the woman who had become like a mother to her. "Thank you. For everything. For seeing the truth in both our hearts when we couldn't see it ourselves." Miss Geneva patted her cheek gently. "The Lord works in mysterious ways, child. Sometimes he has to shake us up a bit to get us where we need to be." A knock at the door revealed Mia, practically vibrating with excitement in her flower girl dress. "Auntie Zoe, everyone's ready and Uncle Rye looks so handsome." Zoe's heart swelled at hearing her niece call Rylan Uncle Rye so naturally. "Is he nervous?" she asked with a smile. "Nope, he just keeps smiling really big," Mia reported seriously. "Miss Geneva, can we start now? My flowers are getting tired of waiting." Miss Geneva laughed. "Well, we certainly can't have tired flowers. Are you ready, dear?" she asked Zoe. Taking a deep breath, Zoe nodded. "More ready than I've ever been for anything." The garden path had been transformed into an aisle, strewn with rose petals and lined with floating candles in glass hurricanes. As the first notes of music filled the air, Mia began her careful procession, concentration evident on her face as she scattered petals with precise movements. When Zoe appeared at the end of the aisle on Miss Geneva's arm, a collective murmur of appreciation rose from the gathered guests. But Zoe barely noticed them. Her eyes were fixed on Rylan, waiting for her beneath an arch woven with white roses and ivy. His face held such open adoration that tears pricked at her eyes. This was so different from their first ceremony. No confusion, no fear, no secrets. Just pure, honest love. As Miss Geneva placed Zoe's hand in Rylan's, she whispered something that made them both smile. Rylan's fingers tightened gently around Zoe's as they turned to face their pastor. "Dearly beloved," the pastor began, "we are gathered here today not to legally join this man and woman, for God has already blessed their union, but to witness their choice to recommit themselves to each other, this time with full hearts and complete understanding." Rylan spoke his vows first, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "Zoe, when you saved my life years ago, you showed me what true courage and compassion looked like. I spent years searching for you, not just because I wanted to thank you, but because I knew in my soul that someone with a heart like yours was worth finding. When fate finally brought you back to me, I acted hastily out of fear for your safety. But God turned my clumsy attempts at protection into the greatest blessing of my life." He paused, squeezing her hands. "Today I choose you again, freely, joyfully, and completely. I vow to protect not just your safety but your heart, to cherish your strength while supporting you in moments of weakness, to be honest in all things, even when truth is difficult, to love you as Christ loves the church, sacrificially and without condition. You are my miracle, my second chance, my home." Tears rolled freely down Zoe's cheeks as she began her own vows. "Rylan, I spent so many years building walls to protect myself, believing that love always came with conditions and pain. But you showed me what real love looks like. Patient, kind, protective, without being possessive. You gave me safety without taking my freedom, strength without demanding my submission, love without expecting perfection in return." Her voice grew stronger as she continued. "Today I choose you with clear eyes and an open heart. I vow to trust in your love, even when my fears whisper doubts, to stand beside you as your partner, your friend, your defender, and your peace. to build a home with you based on faith, honesty, and grace. You are my unexpected blessing, my answered prayer, my proof that God writes better stories than we could ever plan for ourselves." The pastor smiled warmly. "May I have the rings?" Mia stepped forward importantly, holding up a small pillow with their original wedding bands, now inscribed with the date of this ceremony alongside their first wedding date. As they exchanged rings, the setting sun broke through the clouds, bathing them in golden light. "By the power vested in me by God and the state," the pastor proclaimed, "I now pronounce you, once again, husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Rylan drew Zoe close, one hand cradling her face as he kissed her with tender passion. The guests erupted in cheers and applause, but they were interrupted by a small body colliding with their legs. "Auntie Zoe! Uncle Rye!" Mia hugged them both, her flower basket forgotten. Ryland scooped her up, and Zoe's heart melted at the picture they made, the family she never thought she'd have. The celebration moved to the wide porch where tables had been set with Miss Geneva's best linens and china. Lanterns twinkled in the growing dusk as guests enjoyed a feast that combined Zoe's southern comfort food with Ryland's mother's Italian recipes. As evening settled over the estate, Zoe and Ryland stood at the porch railing, his arm around her waist as they watched their loved ones laugh and dance. The security team had relaxed enough to accept plates of cake from Miss Geneva. Aunt Laverne was teaching Mia to two-step, while church members clapped along. Amazing how something that started in such chaos could end up so perfect. Rylan mused, pressing a kiss to her temple. Zoe leaned her head against his shoulder, breathing in the peace of the moment. "I'm finally home," she whispered, and felt his arm tighten around her in response. The garden glowed with candlelight and love, while overhead, stars began to peek through the twilight sky, heaven's own blessing on their new beginning. As the final guests bid their farewells, and the garden lights dimmed to a soft glow, Zoe and Rylan walked hand in hand back into the warmth of their estate. Flower petals from Mia's enthusiastic celebrating still clung to their hair, catching the lamplight like tiny stars. In the living room, Miss Geneva had already prepared a pot of chamomile tea, its soothing aroma filling the air. Aunt Laverne settled into her favorite armchair, while Mia curled up against Zoe on the plush sofa, fighting to keep her eyes open. "I knew it was real," Miss Geneva shared softly, passing around delicate teacups. "When I saw how Rylan looked at you that first morning at breakfast, not like a business arrangement at all, but like a man seeing his future." Aunt Laverne nodded, her eyes twinkling. "For me, it was watching you defend each other at the hospital. That's when I knew God had his hand in this whole thing. I just knew Uncle Rye was nice." Mia mumbled sleepily, making them all chuckle. Rylan wrapped his arm around Zoe, his voice gentle as he shared his vision for their future. "We'll make sure Naomi stays safe through her testimony," he promised. "And then I want to help other women find their way out of dangerous situations." He paused, looking tenderly at his wife. "And someday, when you're ready, we'll grow our family." As Mia finally drifted off in Zoe's lap, her small face peaceful in sleep, Zoe carefully carried her to the guest bedroom. Then she and Rylan stepped out onto the balcony together. The night sky sparkled above them, and wrapped in his strong arms, Zoe whispered her prayer of thanks. This wasn't just their happy ending. It was their hopeful beginning, filled with purpose and promise neither could have imagined when their story first began. Thank you for being here. If something in this story stayed with you, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe. And tomorrow, I'll bring you another story crafted with heart.